عشقت زد پاره شده قلبم آوار شده رفتی و برادر تو بیچاره شده.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي قصرت عن رؤيته أبصار الناظرين وعجزت عن نعته أوهام الواصفين. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. This is the sixth majlis in the series of majalis, which began from Friday night. And as we commemorate the sixth night of the month of Muharram al-Haram, and we are getting closer and closer to the day of Ashura. Although all of the shuhada of Karbala were martyred on a single day, and that was the 10th of Muharram al-Haram. But in order to commemorate all of these 10 nights, we dedicate each night to a shaheed, a companion, someone who was part of this history, someone who was part of this revolution. And the biggest name after the name of Imam Hussain, Sayyid al-Shuhada, is the name of Qamar Bani Hashim Abul Fadl al-Abbas. For many reasons, Abul Fadl al-Abbas, for whom we dedicate tonight. And inshallah, towards the end, we will recite the Rawda and the Musibat of this great personality. We find that Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wasalam made him to be his Sepesalar, the one who was the flag bearer, the one who was the standard bearer. And that is the reason we associate ourselves with the parcham and the flag of Hazrat Abbas alayhi salatu wasalam. A personality who was about 34 years old in the time then when these events took place. He was someone who was trained directly by Amir al-Mu'mineen himself, who showed some glimpses in the Battle of Siffin. But here his real talent was at display in the Battle of Karbala. Someone who really didn't have the opportunity to fight, someone who was not given the permission to fully extend his arms and show the training that he had from Amir al-Mu'mineen, and being raised in the arms of the likes of Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain alayhi wassalam. And from the other side, the love and the compassion that he received from Bibi Zainab and Kulthum. So we realize that it is not an ordinary personality, and we dedicate this night to that standard bearer, the flag bearer, the one who was Sahibul Liwa of Imam Hussain alayhi salatu wassalam. As you know, in these nights, I've been reciting these verses from chapter number 89 from the Holy Quran, verses 27, 28, 29, and 30. And under these ayat, we've been discussing the topic of messages from Ashura, Bayam Haye Ashura. And thus far, we were able to discuss certain paygamat, messages, and the lessons that we can derive from this entire tragedy, looking at the kalam and looking at the actions of Imam Hussain and his companions. What they did, what Imam did as Imam Ma'soom is separate. What they did, not being Ma'soom, the companions, is also worth mentioning. Because it takes courage to display that sort of altruism, that sort of tawakkul, reliance upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It takes courage to show that you're ready to sacrifice yourself and do ithar for the sake of others. And that's what we find in the companions as one of the lessons and the messages from Ashura. As I've been promising to do a little bit of tafsir of these verses, one of the words that is used in these ayat, we talked about the initial portion of it, Ya ayyatuhan nafsul mutma'inna. The second ayat says, Irja'i ila rabbiki radiyatan mardiyah. Radiyah, which is used in the plural, in the feminine sense, because radi would be the masculine and maradi would be the masculine. Radiyah with the ta at the end denotes the fact that it is used for feminine. Why do we associate this ayat with Imam Hussain if this radiyah is associated with a female? And we know one of the titles of Bibi Fatmatul Zahra salamullah alayha is that she was radiyah and she was mardiyah. These are the names that we give our children, our daughters, after the name of Janab Sayyidah. But the fact that it is used in the feminine and not masculine is because of the word nafs. Because this is referring in the context of the ayat. That when Allah says, Ya ayyatuhan nafsul mutma'inna, the word nafs is used in the feminine sense, is mu'annath in Arabic. It's not mudhakkar. And that is the reason whenever you bring the sifat for a mu'annath, you have to bring the sifat and the mawsuf have to be aligned, and they both have to be in the same way. So the mawsuf here is nafs and the sifa is mutma'innah with the ta at the end, denoting that is female or feminine intense. And similarly, the word radiyah and mardiyah. So don't be confused that these two words are used for females and we associate these ayat for Imam Hussain. No, this is referring to in general any nafs, any soul which is mutma'in and they are asked to return to their Lord in the state that they are radi and that their Lord is radi from them. So you become radiyah by doing sabr and doing shukr on what God has given you. You become maradiyah, being chosen by God for what you have done. It is the sign of the satisfied soul. Radi is the one who relies upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because they're radi. They are, content. They're satisfied with the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thus, we understand the concept of tawakkul. Because if Allah has chosen this for us, then we are relying upon Him. That we do tawakkul upon Him. That God wants this from us, so we'll do it. Relying upon that God has intended something for us in it. And of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just. It's one of the titles of God. It is part of our usul-e-din. And therefore, we believe in the justice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one of the messages that we can derive from this concept is from this lesson from the Ashura is the concept of tawakkul, the law of transition and transformation, that things are constantly transforming, and there's a transition that all of us are going through. We believe that this world is a transitory phase, that we're here for time being, and sooner we will leave this world. So we call this a transition. You know, I don't like to give examples of sports, especially tonight, when we are in this somber mood. But just to understand, you say, well, you know, this team is in the transitional phase. That means they're transitioning from being very weak to shuffle kids around and bring new players to get better eventually. So there's a transition that is going on. Or this country is now in transition, and eventually they will be on their feet. Similarly is the concept of transformation. That is a complete overhaul, complete change. And that's where the revolutions come about, to transform people. You know, in fact, we have a qaida in our fiqh when it comes to istihala. Sometimes the word istihala is translated as transformation. That if something was najis, and then it went through this istihala, chemical change, transformation, it becomes pak. So for example, the wood, if the wood was najis, but you burned it, it became ashes. Now these ashes are no longer najis, they are pak. Or for example, a bottle which was filled with alcohol, and it transformed into vinegar, sirka. When it transferred into vinegar, by the mere conversion and the transformation from alcohol to vinegar, it becomes, you know, again, which is you can consume. And the bottle also becomes pak, and it is consumable. So we understand the concept of transition and transformation. In fact, that is the reason the word transition is so fitting for this world. Because ulama akhlaq has compared this world as a train station or an airport where you are in transit, right? When you're going through, you know, flying around, let's say you want to go to perform Hajj, or you want to go for the ziyarah, you know, you take a flight and you stop over somewhere and you're in transit. Or for example, you're taking a train or catching a train to go from one destination to another, and all of the stops that come in the middle, in between these two destinations, is what? You're in transit. The question is, do you intend on staying at this train station where you are in transit forever? Imagine being stuck there because train cannot move, you know, there's no power, or there's inclement weather. Imagine being stuck at the airport because the flight's been canceled. So your transit period becomes extended. How difficult it is. Do you anticipate your delay in this transit, or do you want this to be over as soon as possible? You want it to be over as soon as possible. That's what the transition is. This world is like that train station. This world is like that airport where you're in transit for a few days and you're eventually moving toward your final destination. So don't get too stuck up into this place where you're only here for transition. And then the concept of transformation and change that I have already mentioned. Then there are the laws of depreciation and becoming obsolete. You know, things that were used 100 years ago are no longer in use. Forget 100 years ago. Things and the machines and some of the computers, or even the technology that we have in our vehicles, has evolved. So the technology that we were using in the 70s or the 80s or the 90s is no longer being used or has transformed. So there's depreciation, and certain times things become obsolete. They're no longer in use. And then being forgotten. So you have transition, you have transformation, you have depreciation, you have becoming obsolete, and then being forgotten. can be seen all over the material world, right? So many things have changed. So many things have transformed. So many things have been depreciated. Depreciation for, like the house. You buy a house, and if the property market is low, what happens? The price goes down. That's what depreciation is. So we've seen all of this in the material world. Land changes, mountains, you look at the history of the earth that we live upon, millions and millions years of history, that the projection of what it was and what it has become and what it will be. The entire earth was covered with water, and then eventually the land appeared. This is actually a Muslim concept. Dahwal Ard, that is celebrated, is where the first land appeared beneath the water above the ground, or as a ground, upon which is Kaaba. And then, start spreading. That's why when you put together these continents, it seems like that they were one, and then they started separating. But this separation did not happen overnight. This separation took place over many millions of years. Definitely, we won't be able to see any change in our lifetime. So, land change. Places where were mountains once now are covered with, for example, something else. And then, mountains also change. Quran talks about it, says, وَتَرَى الْجِبَالَ تَحْسَبُهَا جَامِدَةً وَهِيَ تَمَرُّ مَرَّ السَّحَابِ. Sun will cease to shine and the moon will fade away. Of course, that's not going to happen in our lifetime, but that'll happen eventually when Qiyamah takes place. The sun will no longer shine for us, and the moon will also fade away. إِذَا الشَّمْسُ كُوِّرَتْ وَإِذَا النُّجُومُ انْكَدَرَتْ. Surah Takwir, these golden words which talk about the concept of how the best example is in the human being's physical change from birth until death. But insan can remain alive if he has left a legacy. So the way you were born, a child, an infant, become a toddler, and then you get older, you become an adult, and then you start fading away and you become, very advanced in age, and eventually you die. Imam Hussain is a prime example. When you look at the concept of that everything depreciates, some things go obsolete, there's transition and transformation. But the example of Imam Hussain is opposite of all of that. 14 centuries have gone past. 1400 years have passed, and yet every year he's remembered in the same way, if not better. I think he's actually remembered better every single year. Our Azadari is evolving, and we come to understand and appreciate Imam Hussain better every single year when we see all the atrocities that are happening. I believe people living in the 70s and the 80s may have had difficult time understanding that how can someone be so cruel after killing someone to sever their heads of what they did in Karbala, right? Umar Saad, Shimr al-Jawshan, all of these people, before leaving Karbala on the 11th of Muharram al-Haram, what did they do? They severed the heads of Shuhada. They took the heads with them. They left the bodies. We've all heard of that. It was difficult for us to fathom. Books of history are telling us this, but some people had doubts. Not until you saw people like Taliban, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, or you give them whatever name you want to. They're different names, but the same category. Their version of Islam, how they committed these crimes of killing innocent people and then severing their heads off. This became something which was unheard of. It was difficult for us to fathom, but we see that every single day in our lives. What is the reason behind this everlasting effect of Imam Hussain? That after 14 centuries, certain other great personalities of the world are forgotten. Even after their greatest achievements, their own followers don't really remember them that much. They may remember them once a year, if they have a holiday after them. The country that I live in, the day, I don't know if they even know the day their founder was born. But for example, in Pakistan, they celebrate the day when their founder was born, 25th of December, for example. But in the Christian world, we find that Christianity, they celebrate the birth of Jesus on the same day, 25th of December, all over the world. But that's it, that's celebration. And that celebration too has so much gone away from appreciating Jesus with all of these, fabrications that have associated with this religion. I have nothing to do with the essence of Hazrat Isa alayhi salatu wasalam and what he stood for. But this commemoration of Imam Hussain, this commemoration of Abul Fadl al-Abbas, this commemoration of the Shuhada Karbala is still commemorated with the same veneration, with the same attitude, with the same love and compassion, and if not more. What is the reason behind this everlasting effect? Allah gave an example of baqa, of haqq, that truth always prevails. And if it is for the sake of Allah, then it will be everlasting. You try it. The ayat that I'm about to recite talks about the foam upon the flood water. Have you seen when there's a flood somewhere, when the water is gushing out or rolling, when it's moving with speed, especially these, if you've gone to these places where they have these streams were gushing out with force, or these waterfalls where water is falling, what do you see? This white is the foam, the scum upon the flood water. Foam disappears, the water remains. The ayat of Quran says in Surah Ra'd 17, فَأَمَّا الزَّبَدُ فَيَذْهَبُ جُفَاءً وَأَمَّا مَا يَنْفَعُ النَّاسِ فَيَمْكُثُ فِي الْأَرْضِ كَذَلِكَ يَضْرِبُ اللَّهُ الْأَمْثَالَ. That foam, فَيَذْهَبُ جُفَاءً, but that which is beneficial for the people remains in the land. So for example, if this land needed water, it remains and then it produces. Life of Sayyid al-Shuhada is like that water, that source of life, rescued the tree of Islam from drying up and dying. It was on the brink and the threshold of death, where he irrigated it with his own flesh and blood. And that's why the leader of freedom has remained forever. And his, it's just like that water that remains forever. But that foam disappears, but that water remains forever. Example of his, remaining is that of the pure tree, pure word of haqq, which gives fruits. Alam tara kayfa ضرب الله مثلا كلمة طيبة كشجرة طيبة أصلها ثابت وفرعها في السماء تؤتي أكلها كل حين بإذن ربها. That, have you not regarded the example of, كلمة طيبة, the good word, that which is haqq, كشجرة طيبة. It is like that tree which is pure. أصلها ثابت. The roots of it is what? Firm in the ground. وَفَرْعُهَا فِي السَّمَاءِ. But the branches are, reaching up to the heavens. It gives fruits to every, whatever it wants with the idhn of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam remained all these years due to his isar, which is attained through tawakkul on Allah, being content in life and remembering and constantly remembering Qayamat. Surah Ala points out the negative ithar when it says تُؤْثِرُونَ الْحَيَاةَ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى. They prefer this world over the hereafter because of the evilness. It's perishable and doesn't lead man towards any prosperity and najat. Therefore, they are being scolded, otherwise the whole world is an evil and corrupted. This world is actually mazra'atun lil akhirah, or mazra'atul akhirah. This is a place where you do zira'at. You plant seeds so that you may be able to harvest them tomorrow in the hereafter. So preferring others in wealth and in life is a trait which Quran also highlights by saying وَيُؤْثِرُونَ عَلَىٰ أَنفُسِهِمْ وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ, that they prefer others over themselves, وَلَوْ كَانَ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ, even though they themselves are in need of it. Imagine, this is where the difference between ithar and ihsan is. That ithar is when you give to someone while you yourself is in need. Ihsan is when you have 100 and you give 10 to someone and you keep 90 to yourself. You've done ihsan. It's an act of goodness. It's called ihsan. Ithar is you have 100. You said Allah will give me, and you have firm belief in Allah. You keep very little for yourself, a smallest portion to survive, so you don't have to beg, and you give the rest in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is ithar, brothers and sisters. We are the followers of those who never said no to anyone. Even when their enemy comes asking for help, fourth Imam takes that sword which was used to kill, Imam Hussain or the people in Karbala. Imam did not say no when someone came asking for refuge. Farazdak said this about fourth Imam, that he never refused anyone. These are the words of Farazdak when he said in this couplet, that ma qala la qattu illa fi tashahhudihi, that Zainul Abidin never said no to anyone. Ma qala la, he never said la. La means what? No. Qattu, ever, illa fi tashahhudihi, except when he would recite the tashahhud. So when you sit down in tashahhud, you say ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, right? So you have the word la in it. Farazdak is saying that fourth Imam never said tashahhud or never said la except in the tashahhud. Just look at the beauty of it. Lawla tashahhud kanat la'uhu na'am. If it wasn't for the tashahhud, Imam's la is all, na'am, 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 yes, yes, yes. So isar is preferring others yourself. This is another message that we learn and derive from Ashura. What are some of the necessities of isar? How can we do isar? And inshallah, I will connect this with the isar of Abul Fadl Abbas. Isar has certain conditions. It cannot be attained that easily. First condition for isar is to have ikhlas, is to be sincere in that which you're doing. When you try to do something good, there will be hundreds of obstacles in your way, because that's what shaitan is set out to do. Allah has given him the permission. When he asked and he was kicked out of the Jannah, the paradise, Fakhruj, Allah said, get out of here. He said, let me live until the day of judgment. Allah said, not until the day of judgment. Waqtin ma'loom, until appointed time, you have the respite. Go do whatever you want to. He made a covenant at that time. He says, لَأَغْوِيَنَّهُمْ, that I will sit in the path of mu'mineen and muslimin and your followers, and I will misguide them. And very few will be your followers, and majority will listen to me. So whenever we set out to do something good, we find that there's, hundreds of obstacles on the way. So ikhlas is needed. Sincerity is required. Not only is the most fundamental element of ithar, rather ithar which lacks ikhlas is not even considered ithar. That means what? I'm giving everything in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but I'm doing it to show off. I'm ready to face the consequences after being without anything, but I'm doing it what? This isar apparently out of, my own vanity to show off. So ikhlas is very important. For isar, you need bravery. You need to be brave. And Hazrat Abul Fadl Abbas was everything that bravery could imagine. No weak person can prefer others over himself. Weakness of iman, not physical weakness. Someone could be very heavily built, could be able to bench I don't know, 100 pounds, 200 pounds easily, but not having the strength of Iman. There are difference between the two. To be able to control your eyes from that which is haram requires strength, not physical. If you are very healthy and strength is your motto and you're strong, you're able to bench press 100, 150, 200. But when it comes to looking at non-mahram and looking at someone who's you should not be looking at, or seeing something that you should not be seeing, you are unable to do so. Where's your strength? Your strength is only physical, but you're lacking Iman, and your spiritual strength is at a very low rate. That's why the hadith says the bravest among you is the one who has complete control over his desires. So if you're able to say no to your desires, you're a brave man. The bravest among you, hadith says, is the one who has control over their desires. I won't spend too much time on this. The third, after ikhlas and bravery, is basirat, insight. Yes, the one who's doing ithar is doing with basirat, with insight. There's a purpose behind it. That which illuminates the heart. When Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam al-Muttaqeen, Ali ibn Abi Talib was asked about seeing his Allah, his Lord. Have you seen your Lord? Someone asked him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, hal ra'ayta rabbaka hina abadtahu? Oh Imam, have you seen your Allah, your Lord, when you worship him? Imam responded, Qala ma kuntu a'budu rabban lam ara. I don't worship the Lord that I can't see. People were surprised. Really? وَكَيْفَ رَأَيْتَهُ? How did you see him? Imam responded, لا تدركه العيون بمشاهدة العيان ولكن تدركه القلوب بحقائق الإيمان. No, you can't see him with your eyes by looking at it through your eyes, مشاهدة العيان. But you can see him with the hearts and through the truthfulness of Iman that sits inside you. So you won't be able to see Allah because the ayat of Quran says you can't see him. He's not a physical object can be seen. But when you see everything in your surrounding which is created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and given to you, you can witness Allah with your Iman, with your basirat, with that which is inside of your hearts. And lastly, ithar requires what? Receptive and loyal. That you have to be wafadar, ba wafa. And that's one of the attributes that is associated with Abul Fadl Abbas, that he was very, very ba wafa. Things that become obstacle in ithar, sometimes they're individual obstacles, sometimes they're collective, ijtima'i. One who hasn't had any religious teachings nor seen in it that, in the acts of his parents, of course, this person will have difficult time preferring others over himself. Sometimes the society, the peers, the negative tabligh, all of these things together could be the cause of, lowering this concept of isar in you. So therefore, brothers and sisters, one of the topics and the lessons from Ashura that we can derive is the message of ithar, the message of altruism, the message of preferring others over yourself. And there are many things that could, initiate that. You want to know who did ithar? When Hassanain, and this is mentioned in Quran, you go ahead and read Surah Dahr, chapter 76, it talks about it. That when Hassanain were sick, and the Holy Prophet saw them in that state of sickness, the Holy Prophet said to Amir al-Mu'mineen and Bibi Fatima al-Zahra salamullah alayha to fast. They fasted for 3 days. They didn't have a great deal of food to break their fasts, right? The way we do in our Ramadan, we have a full table full of food. That wasn't the case with Imam Ali, who actually went ahead and borrowed money from someone to be able to give something to eat after they break the fast of all day long. But whenever they would sit down to break the fast, either it was the same day or 3 days, when they broke their fast, that every day someone would show up asking for it. وَلَهُ بِهِمْ خَصَاصَةٌ. They were in need of that food because they needed to break their fast. It wasn't that, their stomach was filled and this was extra food laying around, so they gave it away. That was the food that they really needed because they fasted. But they would go ahead and give it to, first day, يُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَأَسِيرًا. They would feed out of the love of this food that they have, or out of the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would feed the miskin, the yatim, and the asir that would come and take this food. That is ithar. It doesn't have to be a great quantity, but as long as there's quality in what you're giving. And that's what we see in Karbala. We see, you don't see a great number of people in presence. There are only 72 by some riwayat, right? Even if you take the other riwayat, it does not exceed the number 130 maximum. If you include all the women and the children and everyone that came and joined Imam Hussain. No more than 130. But let's just keep it to that 72 companions, because we're not counting the female members of the household which were alive and the children who survived, right? These 72 martyrs of Karbala. It's a very small number by any stretch of imagination, as opposed to the 30,000 strong on the other side. But you see, these 72 have the jazba of isar. They have the essence of sacrifice and altruism to prefer others over themselves. Otherwise, a person like Zuhair ibn Qayn was a very wealthy merchant, a businessman who could just go and live his life. But when he sees the opportunity to serve Imam Hussain, he lets everything go. And when he was asked on the night of Ashur, he said, if we were giving life 1,000 times, I would not think about it twice before sacrificing myself for Imam Hussain. That's the level of Isar. And as I mentioned, that one of the attributes associated with Ithar is Ba Wafa, someone who's very, very loyal. Abul Fadl Abbas, I mentioned earlier, that he's a son of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib from his wife Fatima bint Hizam, known as al Banin. Soon after the Shahadat of Bibi Fatima al-Zahra, Amir al-Mu'mineen married Fatima bint Hizam, and she gave 4 children to Imam Ali. And the reason behind it was that he married into that family so that he would have these very sound and very strong children, because they have this strength from their ancestry. So from both men's side and from the women's side. And the product of that was Hazrat Abbas. We saw glimpses of his bravery in the Battle of Siffin. Imam sent him out there. He was only a man of, not more than 12 years old. Imam Ali sent him out. Go ahead. The way he was taking people out, people thought it was Ali himself, because Hazrat Abbas was so tall that he was the same height of a grown man. People thought that it was Ali who was fighting, the way he was showing his skills of archery and bravery. But Imam, when he lifted the niqab from his face to only reveal that this is my son, Abbas. I didn't even send Hassan and Hussein. I only sent Abbas. This is a preview. Keep this in mind, because there will come a day when this man will be standing in the saf of where you will be standing opposite to him. And that day was in Karbala. That when Imam ﷺ gave qurbani after qurbani, when one companion after another companion gave their shahadat, when Zuhair ibn Qayn went, when Muslim ibn Awsaja went, Habib ibn Madahir went, Hur ibn Yazid Riyahi went. All of the other Burair and others went. This is where the turn was for those who are the family members. And amongst the family members, Ali Akbar went, Qasim went, and even the 6-month-old Ali Asghar. And at this point, Imam Hussain was standing in Hazrat Abbas. Qamar Bani Hashim, he asked Imam, "O Mawla, will you give me permission to go to Maqtal?" The response that Imam Hussain gave was, "Ya Abbas, Anta Sahib al-Liwa'i. Anta Sahib al-Liwa'i. You are my flag bearer. You are the one who's holding the parcham. You are the standard bearer. How can I let you go?" Hazrat Abbas, he said, "You're the Sipah Salar." Hazrat Abbas turned around and he said, "Imam, where's the Sipah? Where's the army that I am the Salar and the leader of?" Ajrukum Allah. There's no army behind me. Everyone has died. Everyone has been martyred. Hazrat Abbas is seeking the permission of his Mawla. This is called, brothers and sisters, keep this in mind before we get into the Masaib and the Musibat and the Rawda. I know you want to cry. This is called the utmost level of obedience to your Mawla. Hazrat Abbas has all the bravery and the power in the world to destroy this unit that is standing in front of him. Whether it's Umar Sa'ad, whether it's Shimr al-Jawshan, whether it's their army, Hazrat Abbas has the ability single-handedly, because Imam Hussain showed it. When Imam Hussain goes on the day of Ashur, when Imam was the last one to perform this marika, when Imam went, he killed over 2,000 men single-handedly. And he would have killed more if it wasn't for him to end this war on his own terms and conditions. Hazrat Abbas would have been the same way. He would have converted the entire marika and the battlefield into, all these people would have died. But that's where you find the absolute, obedience. That you have the power, you have the ability, you have the means, but you're still waiting for the obedience, or you're waiting for the command of your master. "O Mawla Hussain, do I have the permission?" Imam says, "Abbas, before you go to Maqtal, do you not hear the sound of al-Atash, al-Atash? Do you not hear the sound of the kids, young children, weeping and crying that they are thirsty?" He said, "Yes, I do." He said, "Go ahead and fetch water for them." Hazrat Abbas, being muti of Imam Hussain, he would rather go in the battlefield and show his bravery over there. But this requires even a bigger courage. Ajrukum Allah. He comes to the tent. His young niece, Janab Sakina Salamullah Alayha, she comes running, or Ruqayya comes running. When they come running, Hazrat Abbas says, "Give me your mashkiza. Give me your water skin." This little girl hands over the water skin to Hazrat Abbas. Hazrat Abbas takes it and he makes his way towards Furat. As he's leaving, this little girl gathers all the other children from Ahlul Bayt, from the Haram of Imam Hussain, gathers them around, says, "My Amu is gone to get water, and he's so loyal that he has never turned any of my requests down. Get ready with these kuzas, these little, cups in your hand. Get ready that he will bring the water for you." All of these children are now standing. They have this hope that Abbas always does what he promises. That's the loyalty that comes with him. Qamar Bani Hashim, Abul Fadl Abbas, he goes towards the Furat. There were 4,000 men waiting for Abbas with their archers, with their swords. But this is where Abbas knew that what he had to do, he had to gain access to the Furat. After pushing all of these men away, Hazrat Abbas, in the sole control of all of Euphrates, he could easily go ahead and drink the water, but his valor, his bravery, his zeal, his ghayrat does not allow him to go ahead and take a sip of water. Even if he had drank, nobody would have blamed him. But still he knows that the children are still thirsty. How can I go ahead and quench my thirst while the kids are still thirsty? So he takes this water skin, he fills it with water to the top as much as he can, and then he closes the lid off. He protects this water skin. As there were 4,000 men waiting for him when he arrived, the same men are now waiting for him as he's leaving. There are strict orders that the water must not reach the tents of Qiyam Hussaini. Hazrat Abbas takes the mashkiza. He holds on to the flag, this Alam Abbas, this Parcham Abbas. He's holding on to the Parcham. He's holding on to the mashkiza, and he's making his way. His last wish is, oh Allah, give me strength and the ability that I fulfill the promise and I bring this water to those little kids. Ajrukum Allah. But it was not meant to be. This was the test, oh Abbas. This was a task which was not supposed to be fulfilled. There came an enemy who attacked Abbas from the right side. He flipped the mashkiza onto his left. And then there comes an enemy who strikes Abbas from the left side. He takes the mashkiza in his mouth, protecting with his body. And as he's moving forward, the Parchame Abbas is coming down. There he receives a blow onto his forehead. Comes that blood gushes out of it. He doesn't mind and he doesn't care. But then there comes one arrow which pierces through the water skin. The mashkiza, that the water skin, now there's a hole in it and the water is draining out of it. All the water is drained out of the water skin and the mashkiza. Abbas does not want to go any further, because how will he face the little Ruqayya and Sakina? How would he face all the other children who are waiting for him to bring the water? And as soon as he receives that blow on his forehead, he comes down onto the ground. One of the orators said, then I would recite the Masaib of Hazrat Abbas. One day I saw Lady Fatma Zahra. She said, you recite the Masaib of Abbas, my son, but you do not do justice. She said, how do I not do justice? What have I left out in the Musibat of Abbas, Qamar Bani Hashim? She said, you don't recite this, that whenever any of the Shaheed, they came down from their horse, they would land. How do you land on the ground? Using your arms. Abbas has lost both of his arms when he was struck on his head and he fell to the ground. How did he support himself? He did not have any arms. Ajrukum Allah. May Allah give you no grief. Last few words. He comes down on the ground and he sends his last salutations. Ya Aba Abdullah. Oh Abdullah, oh Aba Abdullah, alayka minni salam. Oh my master, last salutations from your servant. Imam Hussain hears the sound of Abbas. He gets up, protecting and covering his back. He says, Alan, in kasara zahri. Now my back is broken. Imam gets up, he stumbles a few times, and he rushes towards Abbas. He comes and he picks him up. Ya Abul Fadl, what has happened to you? There's no way this has happened to you. Abbas is crying. Abul Fadl cannot stop weeping. Imam wipes off all the blood from his face and he says, soon you will be quenched. Your thirst will be quenched. You will see your father. You will see your grandfather. Just wait for a few more moments. Abbas says, oh Mawla, I have one request. Please don't take my body to the tents. I won't be able to look at the little girl who asked me to bring water for her. Ajrukum Allah. Imam did not take the body of Abul Fadl. He kept him there. That's why you see the separation between the haram of Imam Hussain and the haram of Abul Fadl Abbas. Last sentence, the Abbas was still weeping. Imam said, oh Abul Fadl, why are you still weeping? He said, oh Mawla, when I fell down, I called upon you. You came running for my rescue. Little bit later on, you will fall down from the horse and nobody will be there to help you. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إن لله وإنا إليه راجعون. Allah, please accept our ibadah tonight. A lot of sins, please forgive our sins. Allah, give us the tawfiq and ability to follow the commands and the teachings of al-Fadl Abbas. Allah, give us the courage and the bravery of al-Fadl Abbas. Allah, hasten the reappearance of our weighted Imam and make us amongst the helpers and the soldiers of Ram. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillah rabbil alameen.
گل وفای من شنو صدای من، گل وفای من شنو صدای من، زمین و آسمان ببین می لرزد به ناله های من.